What's up, vlog gang? Welcome to the vlog. Today we're going to be visiting the sewage treatment plant in Holland. So basically what's going on is we're going to be learning about how our water is processed, where it goes, how that's responsible, the impact on the environment, and we're going to be vlogging it for you guys. So stay tuned for more information about that.
Personally, I feel like I will learn how our water quality is affected by the pollutants in the nearby area. I'm excited to learn how the sewage gets processed and how clean our water actually is, and it'll be fun for us to learn what we can do to improve our water quality in Holland.
Jeremy and Eric. Vlog gang, we got the eye protection on. We're out here not getting stuff in our eyeballs. Soon we're gonna be putting on helmets. So yeah, stay tuned for that. All right, vlog gang, we got on the hard hat, we got on the glasses. We're ready to tour the sewage treatment plant.
Anybody outside of the village where the school is usually septic tanks. So just basically the little town here and a couple of the offshoot streets. It's a very small area that we service here.
This plant takes in about 100,000 gallons a day, processes that,
Man,
which is not a lot compared to what a lot of plants do. Like there's I don't know if you guys are familiar with the city of Buffalo at all, but there's the main plant in the city of Buffalo handles like 300 million, just a fraction of what they take in. But it's also huge compared to this place, and they've got more people to service. So
I've been at sewer conventions and they ask how big your plant is. Well, 100,000 gallons, and some of the ones in New York City are 800 million a day. Like,
my God.
I can't even imagine.
New York City, I think, has 8 water treatment plants that are massive that service the whole city.
Wow.
Because they have the population.
And the problem with plants that big is there's a lot of inflow and infiltration in the sewers. So when it rains or snow melts, their flow can double, triple, quadruple with a lot of weather. Whereas here it's such a small system and it's pretty intact. We do get some, but not as much as other places.
So when they're constructing the sewage treatment plants in New York City, are they constructing it according to what that overflow can be when it rains, or do they just have a bunch of like overflow when it rains like that?
Well, they have overflow retention facilities at the plants, usually with wharfs, and once the plant has max capacity that it can handle, they'll divert the rest of the flow to the wharf, which is, think of like a giant swimming pool, and they'll fill that, and hopefully that will not overflow before the event. So if that does overflow, then all the best you can do is the solids will settle in there. We'll go through a bunch of different chambers, and then they'll chlorinate that, and it will just get sent out. And there's really nothing else you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the first stop. We have right here is a grit channel. So in a lot of especially when we get heavy flows, a lot of grit will get in the system, and it will generally settle out in here. We get this cleaned about twice a year. We'll get it vacuumed out and totally clean. During high flows, we also have the option of a bar screen. We can divert it through here, which has to be cleaned. Or this is a muffin monster. It basically grinds up all the bigger stuff and makes it smaller, so it can go past the pumps. Doesn't clog anything up. So this is step one, and then this is where this ends up. This is called our equalization tank. So we want to keep a steady flow through the plant. So if it rains and our flow goes up, or if it's been really dry and our flow's down, we can just let that equalize in here to keep the same flow going through the plant at all times.
The point of this is you want to avoid something that's called a shock load, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's too much organic matter and too much solid matter being forced through the plant at one time. If the plant gets a shock load, it's difficult for the plant to process what it has to. It's not good.
For instance, one of our major events at this plant, because it's so small, is when the middle school over here backwashes their pool. We'll coordinate with the guy at the middle school, and he will let us know how many gallons, because that's chlorinated water and it could upset our bacteria. So we will divert most of the flow to this tank, let it mix with the influent sewage, and it'll get rid of most of that chlorine before we put it through the plant.
Are there like specific times of year where there are more chemicals in the water from households? Because I'm thinking like obviously that the backwash from the pool is going to be super saturated with chlorine.
Yep.
But depending on different water treatment methods at homes, will you have different levels of chlorine at different times throughout the year?
We probably do, but it's not to the level of like 3,000, 4,000 gallons from the pool at one time. So it really hasn't caused too much trouble. Those are kind of when it mixes with everything in there, it kind of is eliminated.
So is it even measurable at that point?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever have wildlife falling in there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've taken frogs and turtles and what else? Snakes probably out of there.
Wow.
Yep. We try to save them, but sometimes they just don't want to cooperate.
Exactly.
This plant is so small, though, you can see little things happening around the neighborhood that actually have like a visual effect on this tank. Like there's that car wash that's maybe a quarter mile up the road.
Yeah.
If it's a beautiful day like today and people washing their cars, you'll see foam from the soap in the EQ tank. So you do see visual changes in the plant depending on what's happening around town.
And then we aerate it to start the biology happening. So from here, there's 2 pumps in this pit. It'll be pumped up to these. These are our primary clarifiers. That would be step 1. This is where we end up next.
Different stages of the process. What happens over there is called preliminary treatment. This will be primary treatment. The point of this is to mostly get rid of the solids and some of the oxygen demand that different organisms are putting on the plant. These are called primary clarifiers.
Okay.
And they're called clarifiers because that's exactly what they do. They're meant to, and they're kind of semi-conical shaped at the bottom, so all of these solids that come through the wastewater, anything that's heavy enough will settle at the bottom of these, and that's how we remove solid material from the wastewater treatment process. So we have, down in the basement, we've got valves that we open up a couple times a day, and what they basically do is open up a gate to the bottom of the clarifier, drain all that heavy stuff into another pit. All that heavy stuff gets sent on to the next stage of the process.
So what is the function of these misters up here?
Odor control.
Do the odor particles like dissolve into those water droplets and then no longer are
That's
airborne?
What happens, it's mixed. We have basically a giant barrel in the back, and it's a little bit of the odor control perfume solution, and the rest of it is just water.
Interesting, okay.
And it just has a motorized pump that sends all of it through the air, puts it into aerosol form, and then helps keep the odor down at the plant so that people in the neighborhood don't call and complain.
Yeah. So in the winter, I'm always noticing that there's mist around this. How much of that during the winter is steam? Like what temperature is this liquid in here?
It kind of varies. It's kind of like the ambient temperature of whatever's going on outside, but also I think what ends up happening is that the houses around here that are not too far from the plant, if they're using hot water to shower, or whatever they might be doing at home where they're using hot water, it's still kind of warm when it gets to the plant, and I think that's probably why it steams.
So how much of this process is automated versus human intervention?
A lot of it is automated depending on what type of plant that you work at. In other words, because this is a pretty small plant, it is staffed 7 days a week, but someone is not required to actually be working 24 hours a day.
These are the RBCs from the primary clarifiers. It goes. These are the. You notice these ones are bigger. This handles the majority of the load coming in, and then these ones kind of finish it. And yeah, it just all these little plates all have the biology, the bacteria growing in them, and it dips into the water and it just scoops up more of the organic matter, and it just keeps working that way. And this is the first plant I've ever worked at with RBCs, and they work very well.
Oh yeah, check these out. So those are the plates that the water stays in up there. If you see the water level down in there.
Now these are the secondary clarifiers. This is where the water goes after the RBCs. So at this point, most of the solids have settled out in the primary clarifiers. Most of the organic matter has been taken up by the bacteria. So now in here, this is just sort of finishing. It's getting any maybe solids that slip through the process, and they'll settle out in these clarifiers. There's an automatic valve on the bottom of both of these that take the whatever sludge might accumulate and sends it back to the head of the plant like every 45 minutes.
If you're seeing things in these like more sludge than you're getting in your primary clarifiers, that's a problem. They're supposed to be taking out the majority of what comes into the plant as far as the solids go.
And on these RBCs, there's a process called sloughing that when the organic kind of reaches the end of its age, the end of its life, it will start to slough or fall off of the RBC. That will end up and get captured here, then fall to the bottom and get sent back to the head of the plant.
So what would be something that would decrease the effectiveness of those RBCs over there, leading to more sludge in these tanks?
Things like shock loads,
Extreme temperatures, which we try to avoid.
possible septicity. In other words, if there was something like that really bad winter storm that we had last year where we all had like 5 feet of snow, if it was a situation where one of us couldn't get to the plant for 3, 4, 5, 6 days because of a horrible weather event, that sludge that's in the primary clarifiers wouldn't be able to get what's called wasted, moving it through the plant, sending it to the digesters, which we'll show you in a minute. If we couldn't do that and it just ended up sitting at the bottom of that clarifier, eventually septicity would set in and then they wouldn't be able to do their job. You would know that happens because then it starts to nitrify and it starts to float to the top of the clarifier. So if you're paying attention to those and you see sludge that instead of settling to the bottom is all of a sudden kind of bulking up and flowing to the top, that means they're not doing their job or we're not doing our job. Well,
the next step, I don't know if there's room for everybody. You could walk up and peek in this door. These are our sand filters. After the secondary clarifiers, when now we just have water, most of the sludge it'll get put into these sand filters, which is basically 2 big containers with a bed of sand on the bottom. All the flow will go through that sand for like final finishing treatment, just to totally clean any last little things that have to be filtered out.
the digestion process too helps the sludge settle normally. Like, because you might ask, well, why don't you just take everything that comes off the bottom of the primary clarifiers and send it right to the drying bed? It wouldn't essentially bake as well as it does. If you did that, the digestion process helps keep the sludge happy until the time that we're ready to finally pump it out here, let it dry, and get it rolled off.
So this one is almost full.
Oh wow. Yeah.
This is the sludge.
This is the sludge.
This is probably 2% solids. Once we pump it to the drying bed, we're going to want to get it to like 20, 30. We usually, with the drying beds, we can get it up to 80, 90% solids.
Wow, yeah.
And then haul it to landfill. So the drier it is, the more cost effective it is because the less weight you're hauling and all that. It's media and there's filters and there's under drains. Okay. So the water drains through, goes back to the head of the plant, and the sludge dries and stays on top.
So how much of that is liquid underneath?
It's liquid when we're pouring it, and then the water seeps through as it dries, and it all goes to the head of the plant, and then eventually it's just all dry. These are our UV bulbs.
Oh wow, yeah.
The clean water passes through the UV light, and the UV light kills the fecal coliform. Actually, it doesn't kill it. It stops it from multiplying.
Okay.
So it'll basically just stop it from reproducing. So then once it gets out in the creek, it's done. It's neutralized. We sample twice a month to make sure our coliforms are within limits. It comes through the UV, over this outfall, down this pipe, and down to the creek. Like if it's a swimming area or here it's just like a agricultural creek, you're gonna have a different permit.
Yes.
And you're gonna have to meet that permit based on what area you're in.
Makes sense.
According to our permit, our upper limit for the F. coli is 300 parts per million.
Like 2 or 3.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
2 or 3 parts per million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
We're killing 99.999% of all the F. coli.
Better than the hand sanitizer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right here is where our final effluent mixes with the creek and heads down.
All right, cool. That just looks clean. It's clean water. Oh, it's a little tiny boy right there. Interesting. Very cool. With having that those odor controls off over there, how long would it take for an odor to set in after if you were to like run out of the perfume?
This plant, especially compared to some I've worked at, doesn't really smell too bad.
Right.
Although tell my wife that, she drops me off. How can you work here with the smell? I'm like, what smell?
It's complete. I'm already used to it. I've been here for 20 minutes. It's very minimal.
So that's sort of a precaution, and some plants actually need it. I think if our odor control was off, I don't think anyone would complain. Like, I don't get any strong odors from this plant.
They would complain if the odor control was off and we had like an air blower failure.
Yeah, if the digester started to go septic or something.
Smell that.
If there was another issue, yeah. Most of the odor complaints in this area that we've had are like coming from the manholes. During low flows, maybe some of that material settles and it needs a flush to get it to the plant. And if it settles and it's dry, you might get odor out of the manhole.
Yeah,
But once it
whiffs,
gets
yeah.
to the plant and with the EQ tank, we don't really get too much odor here.
Interesting. Very cool.
So I don't know why, but I kind of figured a lot more of it would be centered inside, as opposed to like just giant pits in the ground. So that's probably the biggest difference. Perfume in the mist. I would have never thought of that. I thought just kind of let like the poo-poo smell go everywhere.
My favorite part of the experience was the journey I took with my friends.
Okay.
Seeing all the sludge and the poopy water. It was so fun. I don't know, I had a good time, you know. And like honestly, like Ryan said in the facility, I didn't know what to expect. But like just to see what it was like, you know, that was pretty cool.
We all have our own poop journey. Our sewage gets treated in different ways every single day, and we have to get through it. We have to be clean water in the end. We have to go into those creeks and make it. I would say that facility teaches us all a lesson in life. Yes.
All right, vlog gang, that's it for the sewage treatment plant visit. Hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you guys for the next field trip. Bye.
Jackson got the poopy all over his sweatshirt.
Jackson!
Yeah, he got poopy on his sweatshirt.